There are a whole bunch of different tests that I often talk about when we are diving into your stress system. Um, and there's a reason that um, these tests are very important for giving you answers. A lot of you have gone to your doctors. This happened to me. Um, and it was super frustrating when I would come back from my doctors and being told, your cortisol levels are really low. You're close to Addison's disease, but you're not there yet. Let's keep an eye on you. And then my estrogen would be off, and testing all the different things. I had colonoscopies and all kinds of like gut stool tests. And it was actually kind of frustrating when a couple of years ago, I had done finally functional tests, which I'll explain to you what they are. And I had these functional tests that finally showed up what was going on in my gut, what was going on in my hormonal system, with toxins in my body, where nutrients were deficient in my adrenals. And I submitted them all to my doctor, and I sent them to her, and I said, hey, these are the test results that showed some things that are wrong. I'm sharing them with you so that you're up to date on my medical records and my treatment and what's been helping me. And they called me back and they said, oh, we don't know how to read those tests. They go, but let's go over the tests that you've had. So they went over 20 years of tests, different colonoscopies, all the tests that I just listed for you guys. Blood tests, this showed negative. Stool test, this was negative. And they kept saying, we did this, it was negative. We did this, it was negative. And I kept saying, yeah, none of those showed what was wrong for 20 friggin' years. For 20 years, I was struggling. So, and every time I'd come back from them with a negative test, I would feel like there was something wrong with me. And it was so frustrating. So today, what I'm going to do is go over the different tests that we do in our program, tests that throughout my recovery, through figuring out how to get my stress system on track, have been like beyond amazing for helping me. And I'm going to explain them to you right now. But the first thing, though, is to understand the difference between the tests that your doctor does and these tests. So we have two different types of medicine. We have Eastern and Western medicine. And when we're talking about our medical system, that is our Western medicine. And it is all based on crisis triage medicine, which 1000% has a place. It really does. This is the medicine that EMS, fire, police, like that you guys are using on calls all the time, triage. This is the medicine that is used in emergency rooms. It is the medicine that is used for disease, okay? Not for disease prevention. It's the medicine used to fight diseases when you already have them. So when our doctor is looking at different tests, the type of tests that they do, they're all ordered and looking for disease markers. So as I said earlier, when we were looking at my cortisol and they were testing it, my cortisol wasn't in Addison's disease, which is 2.5% functioning of your cortisol. Your organs are shutting down. It's just you're in the hospital, and it is an absolute emergency. And as my doctor said, I wasn't there yet. So that is what your doctor's looking for. When they're looking for in your stool test, in your gut, they're looking for certain pathogens that lead to disease. And the thing is that not all pathogens lead to disease, not all things that happen. So when we go and we look at things more from an Eastern medicine, which has been practiced for longer than our Western medicine, because this goes way back into all of our history, we're looking at things from a functional standpoint. And so the testing is different. They're looking for different markers. When you do a blood test from a doctor's medical point of view, the markers that they're looking at is relative to, let's say, 1,000 people that did these blood tests from in the hospital. Thing is most people that go to the hospital have they're already in a state of illness of some sort. They're at the hospital for a reason. So something is off. So if they're testing cortisol levels, so they're testing where is the median of these people here, and that's where they get their markers from. When you go from a functional standpoint, they do 1,000 blood tests, 1,000 stool tests, all of these things based on healthy people that don't have symptoms, people that they're not struggling with any of the issues. So you're getting markers from them. So when they're looking at markers of saying, oh, your testosterone needs to be here, or your estrogen needs to be here, or your cortisol, or your cholesterol, your blood pressure, your toxin loads, the vitamins and nutrients that your adrenals need, your stress system needs to be fueled off of. These are based off of what is in a healthy person's results. So sometimes the testing is even the same. So when we're looking at your test results of your blood test results, so we have people submit colonoscopies and blood tests and stool samples. And when we're looking at those results, we're looking at them from the functional markers. So there's that difference, but also then the tests and the choices that we do are also different. So I'm going to run through the tests. So when you start on with us, we start off with 2 tests. There's actually 3 that we like, but the third one we don't order, you do, because we have this way that we got a discount code for people that are in our program is if they order it externally, and it comes to I think it's $250 test that you get for, I think, 85 US dollars or 102 Canadian. So we would highly suggest you order those. So I'm going to go through those 3 first, and then I'll go through additional tests that depending on symptoms that you have that we may suggest when you're working with us. So the first one is the hormone test. So what this hormone test does, normally your doctor does a blood test, checks your testosterone, checks your estrogen, and will test things more from blood tests, cortisol. The thing is that your hormones, I like to think of them as being like a mountain. At the top, you have of your stress system, the stress hormones, you have pregnenolone, and then it splits and does 2 jobs and changes names and splits. You've got DHEA in there, you've got testosterone, you've got cortisol, you've got estrogen, all of these as you're going down this mountain. And let's say in this mountain, as it's going, that's the water is flowing down where every split is. Let's say there's a rock slide. That means more is going to flow down this way. Or let's say that one of those openings opens up more, then more is going to flow that way. The other side's going to dry up. So as you're going through this mountain, you get less and less on one side, more on the other. So we find a lot that cortisol, sometimes your blood tests from cortisol come back and they show that your cortisol is really low. Thing is it could be stolen. They call it the pregnenolone steal. So it's being stolen for other hormones. If we think of that mountain, it's being pulled other ways. Same thing with testosterone. Cortisol steals testosterone as well as estrogen. So if you're just doing a blood test and you test low, it doesn't even necessarily mean that your testosterone is low. It just means it's being stolen. So we need to rebuild up that pathway so that it flows naturally and evenly the ways that it needs to go. So that test is our hormonal test that we go through. And that is a 24-hour urine test. So it tests your stress hormones over a 24-hour period, which is amazing for all of you because you guys are different day, night. Whereas if you're doing a blood test as well for cortisol, it's supposed to be within the first 30 minutes of wakening. Blood labs aren't usually open then. And you guys are so off with your cortisol and your testosterone knowing when, because it's your wakening and wakening hormone. It doesn't know when you're supposed to wake because of all your rotating shifts or 24-hour shifts where you have calls in the night. So the urine test gives us a really good in-depth picture of what is going on in all of your stress hormones. So we know in you where we need to be adjusting and changing things. Okay. Then the second one that we do for you guys is a hair mineral analysis test. Now, being cautious as to where you take them from. There are some very reputable companies, some not so reputable companies, really making sure that you dive into how their process is and really getting the hair. Hair versus blood. Hair, as it's growing, grows out. And if you take about an inch of it, you get about 2 to 3 months worth of information. Blood is what's in your blood right now. So when we're looking at toxins, so for fire, we're seeing like arsenic, cadmium, sometimes starts with an M. Totally, you guys know exactly what I'm saying. One that starts with an M is so common. I'll write it in the comments if I forget, or I'll tell you later. But we see some higher of these with the fire guys. Sometimes lead. Some guys that are on tactical units for police or that spend a lot of time in a firing range, their lead may be up. There's lead, there's cadmium as well that cover bullets. And so the thing is that toxins usually are stored in your bones. And if you're doing blood tests, all you're doing is checking what your recent toxin load was, what your recent toxin exposure was. And that eventually floats through your body and gets stored in the bones. So you're not doing a really good check of what your body's burden is of these toxins that are going through with you. And so that one we find very fascinating with you guys. Even if we think about any scene, there's usually EMS fire. You guys are on the scene as well, and you don't have the same protective gear that fire does, or EMS police. But with the fire as well, you guys just taking off your equipment after, you're still exposed to it. I know there's protocols for that, but it's on your truck, it's on your clothes, it's on everything. All your PPE is covered in it. So it's really important to have that test. This test also tells us your vitamins and minerals that your body is, that your stress system and your thyroid use a lot of, your adrenals and thyroid, because your body flies through these vitamins and minerals. Your body flies through them. And there's no way that no matter how healthy you eat, that you will ever get enough vitamins and minerals to support the stress that just your shifts alone requires from your stress system. So right from the bat, when we start working with you guys, we make sure that we check into your hormones, we check into your toxins, your heavy metal toxins, and we check into these vitamins and minerals. The vitamins and minerals too, there's different ratios of them. Also with the toxins, selenium binds to the one that starts with an M, and I don't know why I can't remember it. But selenium binds to that. So if you have high levels of selenium in you and you have high levels of that toxin, then it is actually binding and pulling it actually out of your bone. When you're low in vitamin D, you're pulling, then as the calcium is leaching out of your bones, it's also leaching these toxins into your body. So it's really important to understand all of these ratios. So those are the two that we give you right away that are included in our program. The third one is a special stool test. So it is one that is actually checking all of the different bacteria that's in your gut, good bacteria and bad bacteria. And there's a lot of new studies that have come out there that are showing that just going in and fighting all the bad bacteria, trying to wipe them away, trying to kill them out, which is what antibiotics and stuff does, is also killing all the good bacteria. So this test tells us which bacteria are killed, which good bacteria are killed, because then we know which probiotic we need you to take for the rest of your life. It also tells us which ones you're low in. And when you're low in them, it means you just have a smaller army, but we need a bigger army of those. Too much of an army, and you're pretty much overpowering everything else. Sometimes, if you have too many guys working, like more guys than you need to actually be on a scene, that can be worse off as well. So we don't want too many of these bacteria. We don't want too little. So this really helps us understand, okay, who else do we need to add into your army in order to be protecting and making sure your body can be digesting and really have, make sure that your stomach acids are up and healing your gut lining. So this test is so phenomenal. So we start hitting the three aspects of your stress system, which is your hormones and your gut. And then we start diving into that nervous system aspect of it. So we're hitting all three of them and finding out what's going on in each system. So those are the three that we start everybody with, but then there are other tests as well. So we have deeper dives for other gut tests. We have some that will test if you have celiac disease. We have others that will take a deeper dive. That would be more for somebody who has like Crohn's, colitis, really deep gut issues. We would probably try the $100 test first and see where that would get us and help you with everything. because the amount of information that our practitioner is able to pull from there blows me away. It's phenomenal. But there are some bigger tests that if your symptoms uh, do give us information from your intake form and everything, and this one test isn't enough of a calorie, then we can do that other test to really dive into some deeper information. Those, I'm going to say, are far and few between. It's usually that $100 test that people start with at the beginning is the one that most need, unless you're Crohn's, colitis, and really major IBS issues. And then we get into other toxin testing. We do have some other toxin testing for environmental toxins. We also have some that can do mold. And we have some guys too that we have a $10 test that we do with you guys that can kind of give us some ideas of mold. If you had symptoms from your intake form that showed us that. And we had an officer too that was saying that in his precinct, they did find mold. And he was working in the detective's office in this environment for so long. And so we did that test with him, and we found out that his issues a lot of them were coming to mold. So we helped him with that. So a lot of different things that can be stressing at your system. And so our intake form is pretty in depth when you join. But getting that intake form helps guide us on, okay, this is the direction that we need to maybe go, start getting you to fill out some more intake forms to find out if you do have other symptoms that will lead us certain ways. And then that gets us into what I call our emissions test. So we have this emissions test where pretty much in a car, you go and do your emissions test, and it tells you how efficient your system is, and what is being emitted. Is it a lot of pollutants? Are you really breaking down the gas and the oil in your engine properly and emitting it out of the tailpipe of your car? Or is it not being efficient? Is there a lot of crap going on in there and coming out? So this emissions test, I know, was a huge one for me. We found out that I don't absorb vitamin B very well. We found out that I have some yeast going on, some candida overgrowth. We found out that I don't methylate properly. So when you methylation is basically all of your cells breaking down and repairing themselves, all of them. So this explains as well why I struggled with working out for so long, is that my body was not methylating properly. So I take a supplement every day, simple supplement that you just get at your like health food store. And because when you don't methylate well, your glutathione depletes. So we found out through this test that I was absolutely depleted in glutathione, and my cells couldn't repair themselves. So I couldn't heal. I was getting repetitive injuries, and I couldn't heal from my workouts. We found out a lot more from this as well. I wasn't oxalating properly. All of these different things came out that my emission system, I failed. I would not be a car that was passed to go out on the road. And you wouldn't know by looking at me, right? But I was sucking wind in my workouts. I couldn't get through my day. I was tired from the moment I woke up. And I'd already done the hormones, I'd already done the toxins, I'd already done the nutrition stuff, and I was still struggling. So that's when we did the emissions test, and we're like, whoa, there's the rest of our answers. And there was one other piece of the puzzle for me as well, which was genetic testing. So we did genetic testing. And I know for some of you, getting your DNA out there, you don't want anybody knowing what's in your DNA, but we've figured out a way where our practitioners in the States, I'm in Canada, we just send the test to our house, we mail them to you. So it's not traced to you. You use an alias name, you mail them back. So we use your birth month, change the date, same year though. It's an alias name, and it is mailed to our address. So it is not registered through you at all. But if we get to that point where we're like, things are off, and that's where we found out, we found out my methylation, my phosphocholine, my detox pathways were really sluggish. So we started looking at a lot of my different SNPs. So when you do genetic testing, you can have all these genetic SNPs. One of mine is that I have the fat gene. but I have a 6-pack abs. So what that tells you is that my fat gene hasn't been turned on yet. So you can have all kinds of different SNPs, but you may not have them turned on. But then when we did my emissions test, we're like, oh, that's because of this genetic SNP. So this is the supplement that you need to support that. Oh, your vitamin B is really off. I had a genetic SNP that didn't absorb vitamin B very well. So we started upping my vitamin B and getting it to a point where then we did blood tests to find out what dosage of vitamin B I needed to make sure that I was at my optimum levels in my body. So that was the same thing with D. My detox pathways were horrible. So I needed to do some stuff to support my liver and support my kidneys in order to be able to detox. And when we looked at my SNPs, we're like, And then we also looked at my SNPs too for oxalates and methylation, all of these things. So my genetic testing was right. So we start you off with those 3 tests I suggested, or I told you about. And then if we need, then we have other avenues to go. Do we need to look at mold? Do we need to look at environmental toxins? Do we need to look at your emissions? See how those work. If those don't, then we can go into genetics. So there's different pathways and stages, and it's different for each one of you. But having these tests and understanding explains a lot as to why your medical doctor hasn't been able to help with this stuff, because all of these things are looking from that functional perspective. They're not looking at things from that, they're looking from the functional perspective. They're not looking from that perspective of, or sorry, they're looking at things from the reactive crisis disease standpoint, and they're not looking at it from a preventative point of view. And they're very different, very, very different when we're looking at them. I know I was close to pretty much being where my body just conked out, and I would have been in Addison's disease and I would have been in the hospital. And that's when my doctors would have been able to find things wrong and start treating me. But I hit it before then. So if you guys want to hit it before then, let us know. Ask us all of your questions. Again, if you want to be anonymous, you can comment below here. If you don't, ask all your questions. If you want to be anonymous, just email us, support@911lifestyle.com, and ask us all of your questions. We are absolutely here to help you and get you where you guys can be functioning optimally. We are in your corner and here to help.